We directed from Washington when to sow and when to reap, we should soon want bread. Well, for 30 years, we've been directed from Washington how to develop our energy. It should surprise no one that today we lack energy. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Madam Chair, I rise in opposition to the amendment and move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I do rise in strong opposition to the gentleman's amendment. It would cut over 10% of total funding in the bill. Specifically, would eliminate or significantly reduce funding for 14 different accounts. I have several concerns. One, the gentleman said that it is time to get out of subsidizing energy research. Notice that he did zero out many accounts and certainly would not argue that point. But as a proponent myself of nuclear energy, would point out that he did not zero out that account, and approximately $444 million would be left in the nuclear research account. So there was some selectivity that was engaged in here as far as the construction of the amendment. And my concern here as far as the research, as far as a whole broad range of energy research in this country, is we do need to make that investment to move ahead economically, to move ahead in reducing our dependency upon oil imports and the use of carbon in this society, and strongly oppose the gentleman's amendment, and would yield time to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Gentleman from Massachusetts, recognized.
I thank the gentleman very much. This is, a classic case of ancestor worship. They leave in the money for nuclear, but zero out the money for wind, zero out the money for solar, zero out the money for energy efficiency, zero out the money for conservation. So here we are. It's 2 months after Fukushima. The capital markets are saying, we're not going to touch new nuclear power plants. But this amendment says we're leaving in $476 million for research done by the federal government for nuclear power. But for wind and for solar, for all the new technologies coming down the line that don't melt down, no, that money's going to be zeroed out. Zero for the future. But this rearview mirror budget, an amendment which is being made by the gentleman from California, it just continues to reflect this attitude, this fear. Let's admit it. There's a fear that the oil and gas industry, that the nuclear industry have about wind and solar and biomass and geothermal and the ever-increasing efficiency of technologies all across the board. And so the green generation, they look down here, these young people, they say, is that possible? Is it possible that the Congress could actually vote to zero out wind and solar and keep in money for nuclear 2 months after Fukushima? Isn't it time for us to invest in these new technologies? You don't need an evacuation plan around a solar plant, around a wind plant, around an energy efficiency facility. So, again, I urge a no vote on this amendment. It's just basically another data point that indicates that the Republicans are really committed to zeroing out this renewable energy future for our country. But just be knowledgeable here. There has not been a new nuclear power plant completed that has been ordered for 36 consecutive years, but there were 10,000 new megawatts of wind that were installed in our country just last year. And if that's what they want to begin to zero out, if that's what they want to take out of the budget, it's only a reflection of basically, again, this technological ancestor
Will the gentleman yield?
The gentleman from Indiana controls the time.
I would be happy to.
Just to be clear, the $400 million remaining in the nuclear accounts, as I understand, is for regulatory activities, not for research and development, which we now place back in the hands of the productive sector.
You're saying this is the budget for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission?
for regulatory activities associated with this provision?
Well, that in and of itself is a subsidy. Let's be honest. It's federal taxpayer money, which is subsidizing an industry, the electric utility industry, the nuclear electric utility industry, that is probably the wealthiest industry in the United States, with the exception of the oil and gas industry. And so why should the taxpayer be subsidizing that at the same time taking out the funding for the wind and solar industry? So I urge a no vote, and I yield back to the ranking member.
I appreciate the gentleman's comment. It was simply...
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment, and I move to strike the last word.
And the gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Our energy and water bill is already $1 billion below fiscal year last year's fiscal amount, and $2.8 billion below fiscal year 2010. As a matter of fact, our entire mark is reaching the 2006 level. So the committee has done its homework. We've made deep cuts. I think the committee understands we're about to go off a fiscal cliff in our country. But the cuts that we've made were developed after a lot of hearings, a lot of discussion, a lot of thought. And our bill the bill recommended by our committee, recognizing that, you know, the federal government's gotten too large, and in many ways, philosophically, I agree with what a lot of the gentleman from California says, that we're too involved with the private sector, sometimes picking winners and losers in different technologies where the market should be choosing. But the committee is also mindful that there are appropriate roles that the government should take, because sometimes the private sector can or will not take those risks. The cuts proposed in this amendment would eliminate, as the ranking member said, or cut many worthwhile programs, put at risk, I think, in many instances, our country's competitive intellectual advantage, and put in doubt perhaps the ability of the private sector to make some substantial investments, and those investments lead to jobs that we badly need. So for that and many other reasons, I oppose the gentleman's amendment and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
I rise to strike the last word.
And the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady. And for what? For what? Why would we zero out the wind and the solar budget? Why would we zero out the energy efficiency, the conservation budget? For what? Well, so that we can have larger tax breaks, they tell us. Because in another room, not too far from here, there are a whole bunch of Republican negotiators saying that the $4 billion a year, which are the tax breaks for the oil industry, they're off the table. You can't touch those tax breaks for the oil industry. Can't touch them. And over the next 10 years, that's $40 billion for the oil industry. So we're out here kneecapping wind and solar, kneecapping the future, kneecapping our ability to have wind and solar become equal with natural gas and coal as a way to generate electricity in our country. And in another room, no more than 100 feet from here, they're also meeting, deciding what the big deal is going to be between President Obama and the Republicans here in the Congress. And in that room, they're saying no touching any tax breaks for the oil and gas industry, which is $4 billion a year. So see the total story here. See the big picture. See really what this agenda is. Here, it's kind of like the Monsignor that goes up into the pulpit on Sunday and he says, on Wednesday in the church hall, Father Guiney will lecture on the evils of gambling. On Thursday, in the church hall, bingo. Well, here on the House floor on Monday, we're learning about the evils of giving any kind of subsidies to the wind and the solar industry. And in another room, right around the corner, they're saying $4 billion a year to the oil industry in tax breaks. That's the agenda. You have to see it in its totality. You have to capture it for all that it is as a story of the future of our country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I urge a very strong no vote on the amendment of the gentleman from California. This is a defining vote. This really goes to the heart of whether or not we are going to say to the young people in our country that we do have a renewable energy future for our country. The past is just a memory, but the future will be the hard reality for young people in our country if we do not put together an energy agenda dependent upon the indigenous renewable energy resources in our country. This amendment zeroes out that future. It makes it impossible for us to compete and to send a signal overseas that we are going to have true energy independence in our country. I urge a no vote.
Back the balance of his time. Does any other member wish to speak to the amendment? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. And those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed will say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Madam Chairman, on that I'd request a recorded vote.
Gentleman requests a recorded vote, and pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. Purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Markey of Massachusetts. Page 23, line 4, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $100 million. Page 24, line 6, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $50 million. Page 24, line 18, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $50 million.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 5 minutes to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. My amendment deals with the heart of what's wrong with this entire bill. In this bill, the Republicans cut the budget for solar, for wind, for geothermal, for biomass, for clean vehicles. That's plug-in hybrids and all-electric vehicles. They cut the budget for science. They cut the budget for weatherization. They cut the budget for energy efficiency. But what do they do in the same bill? They increase the budget for coal, for oil, for gas, for nuclear. They increase it while they eviscerate, while they annihilate the clean energy budget, the future energy agenda for our country. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a big moment here. Where is America heading? Are we going to compete against the Saudi Arabians, the Venezuelans, and others in the generation of energy? Or are we going to capitulate? Are we going to just become a country where we're importing oil? Or are we going to move to a solar future, a wind future, an all-electric vehicle future over the next 20 and 30 and 40 years? You know, this budget that they have put together is really one that gets right to the heart of their argument that they say they care about all of the above. What this budget actually says is it is oil above all. It's still a fossil fuel agenda. It's not a technology-oriented agenda. It's not an agenda that can help us to turn the corner and to create new technologies that move us to a 21st century agenda. But see this in the larger picture. This is not compromise. The defense budget last week went up $17 billion. They're not going to cut defense. They're saying they're not going to actually take away the tax breaks for billionaires. They're saying they're not actually going to take away the tax breaks for the oil and gas industry. All of that is safe. Don't worry, they say to billionaires. Don't worry, they say to big oil. Don't worry, they say to the Defense Department. We're not touching you in this big budget deal that we want. And then where do they turn? They turn over here to solar and wind, and to geothermal and biomass, to plug-in hybrids, to all the technologies that we should be investing in the future. And they turned to Grandma and said, your Medicare benefit is too big. They turned to Medicaid. They say, you poor child, you're taking too much of America's wealth. And you, green energy sector, we can't afford to invest in you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is not compromise. This is the capitulation that they're looking for from the Democrats. This is the capitulation to an agenda that helps billionaires, helps big oil, helps big gas, helps us export jobs overseas by keeping those tax breaks in place, rather than fighting hard for what the green generation, the young people in our country expect us to do, rather than allowing ourselves to be tipped upside down at the gasoline pump. So all I do is take $100 million, move it from the coal subsidies, the oil and the gas subsidies, and move it over to solar and wind, to plug-in hybrids, to all-electric vehicles. And with that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, they still haven't been cut this year in this budget. That's just taking away the increase that they get in this budget, and we still haven't made up for all of the cuts in the solar and wind and clean energy budget that they continue to slash. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's $100 million. Does oil and coal and gas deserve an increase this year? Let's at least keep them level and give that extra $100 million over to the clean energy technologies of the future. That is the least that the green generation, that the young people in our country expect us to do. Because it's not only imported oil, it's also our national security. It's also global warming. It's also creating economic jobs here in the United States.
Gentleman's
I urge
time's
and I
expired.
vote.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment and move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
His amendment would increase funding for the energy and efficiency and renewable energy accounts and reduce funding for fossil energy research and nuclear energy research. This would increase money for a program that already receives sufficient funds and hamper further efforts to further technologies that produce most of our electricity. Mr. Chairman, the gentleman asserted that fossil and nuclear energy are yesterday's sources of energy and that we're shortchanging tomorrow's energy sources. Well, in fact, nuclear energy produces 20% of our nation's electricity, and even the state of Massachusetts depends on nuclear energy for about 10% of its energy. Fossil fuels such as coal and natural gas generate 70% of our nation's electricity, and we'll use these valuable energy sources for many generations. In fact, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts gets 80% of its electricity from fossil fuels. I understand his desire to move us forward, but realistically we'll be using fossil fuels for decades and nuclear energy, perhaps for centuries. And we must ensure that we use these resources as efficiently and clearly as possible. Further, the amendment increases funding for that energy efficiency and renewable account, a program that has seen a record increase since 2007 and still has nearly $9 billion of unspent stimulus funds from 2009. Imagine that. There's a proper role for core energy efficiency and renewable programs, and the bill preserves funding for those activities while cutting out activities that are redundant with the private sector and that interfere improperly with private market innovation. But his amendment would add back unnecessary funding for the administration proposals that are poorly planned and lack justification. For example, the administration proposes more than $200 million to deploy electric vehicle infrastructure. But after repeated requests, the department provided less than 1 page of explanation for this program. At best, this funding would be poorly used, and at worst, it would interfere with entrepreneurial innovations in infrastructure underway in the private sector. The administration also proposes a new Race to the Green program, a state and city grant program. Again, after repeated requests for justifications to the Department of Energy, this new $100 million proposal is accompanied by barely more than a paragraph of explanation. When every tax dollar must be spent well, we can't throw money at poorly planned programs while cutting fossil energy and nuclear program. I therefore oppose the amendment and urge all members to do likewise, and yield back.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back the balance of his time. Does any other member wish to speak to the gentleman's amendment? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts, and those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
On that, I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey
Madam Chair, I
rise?
move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee now rise, and those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted, and accordingly the committee will rise.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 2354, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
the Chair of the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 2354 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on which the motion to suspend the rules, on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, and on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Any record vote on the postponed question will be taken after 6:30 p.m. today.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have a bill at the desk.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2417, a bill to repeal certain amendments to the Energy Policy and Conservation Act with respect to lighting, energy efficiency, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks on this legislation and to insert extraneous material on the bill.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself. Well, first, Mr. Speaker, does Mrs. Blackburn wish to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, and I want to start off by introducing to the body my special assistant this week, Mr. Speaker, young Jack Kevin Barton, my 5-year-old son. He is with me to help with the congressional baseball game that we're going to play on Thursday evening, and he loves coming to the floor and he loves voting, so we're glad to have Jack Kevin on the floor with us. Mr. Speaker, we're here today because of something that happened back in 2007 when this body passed a bill that later became a law that effectively, beginning next year, if not changed, would ban the traditional incandescent light bulb, the 100-watt bulbs, the 60-watt bulbs that we've all grown up with. The bill doesn't truly ban them. It just sets an efficiency standard that the current light bulbs cannot meet. The problem with the de facto ban, Madam Speaker, is that it has the effect of taking off the market one of the least expensive options for lighting in our constituent's home. I went to a local grocery store last week and purchased one CFL 60-watt bulb for $5.99. I purchased 4 60-watt incandescent light bulbs in a 4-pack for $1.50 or 37.5 cents apiece. Now, obviously, a $6 light bulb is a much bigger expense to a moderate or low-income family than a 37.5-cent light bulb. The 60-watt CFL does claim that it will last 10,000 hours, and it does claim that over its life it will save money. That's probably a true statement, Madam Speaker. But what is not so apparent is that that $6 cost up front is real, and the savings may or may not occur depending on how long that bulb lasts, how often it's used, and under what conditions it's used. If you assume that the average bulb is used 4 hours a day, which is what the American Lighting Association assumes, then it is quite possible, Madam Speaker, that that $6 CFL bulb won't last 10,000 hours if it's turned on and off 2,500 times. It might last half that long. So I'm not opposed to the squiggly tail CFLs. I think they have their place in the market, but to take off the market something that's cheap, effective, and in average use costs maybe 2 or 3 cents a week to use seems to me to be overkill by the federal government. When I've talked about the light bulb bill in my town hall meetings and in my meetings in my district, I have had very few people, Madam Speaker, say that they think that's a good piece of legislation, that they think the federal government should be telling us what kind of light bulbs we should and should not use. I think we should let the marketplace operate. We should repeal this de facto ban, then let people decide whether they want to pay $6 per light bulb or 37.5 cents. Some people may decide that the life expectancy cost savings are worth it, but I bet the majority, the overwhelming majority, would choose the less expensive upfront cost of the traditional incandescent light bulbs. With that, Madam Speaker, I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Pennsylvania.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 5 minutes. I claim the time and yield myself 5 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill. I was on the committee back in 2007 when we first wrote the efficiency standards that Republicans are trying to repeal here today. The way I remember it, our current chairman, Mr. Upton, introduced the bill to set the standards. Our former House Speaker, Dennis Hastert, supported it, along with many Republicans. And finally, President George W. Bush signed these standards into law. In fact, if you look at the history behind consensus efficiency standard, you'll see that this used to be something that we all agreed upon. Beginning with President Reagan in 1987, Congress and the White House have enacted federal energy efficiency standards 5 times, each time with bipartisan support. These standards were developed as consensus agreements with manufacturers, energy efficiency advocates, and states. There's more than 50 products on the market today that are covered by a variety of these federal standards. Everything from dishwashers and refrigerators to traffic signals have become more efficient as a result of these federal standards, saving the country energy and saving consumers money. These standards have been in effect since 1987, have saved Americans about 3.6 quads of energy. If we continue with enacting federal efficiency standards, we can save up to 6.1 quads of energy by 2030. That is more energy than was used in my state of Pennsylvania in 2008. The light bulb efficiency standards alone will save Pennsylvania 3.64 billion kilowatt hours of energy in a year. That means we'll save $465 million in Pennsylvania in just 1 year from these standards. In Congress, we don't always agree on much, but for the last 25 years we've been able to agree on energy efficiency, and it's been good for the country and for American families and for the environment. So why would we wish to reverse this policy today? But you know, energy and cost savings aren't the only benefits from these standards. Having lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania my whole life, I've seen how efficiency can revolutionize an industry and revitalize a city. In the 70s, I worked 2 summers at J&L Steel Mill in Pittsburgh's South Side. The industry was doing well and Pittsburgh was a company town. But in a few years, that industry came to a screeching halt as international competitors were making steel using new technologies and more efficient processes, allowing them to undercut the price of U.S. steel. But the steel industry didn't leave the United States, and it didn't leave Pittsburgh. It reinvented itself. It got smarter and leaner and more energy efficient. U.S. steelmakers started using blast oxygen furnaces rather than old open hearth furnaces that used more energy. They started doing continuous casting rather than ingots and molds that required reheating. They started using waste heat recovery and energy monitoring and management technologies. As a result, the U.S. steel industry has reduced the amount of energy needed to produce a ton of steel by 33% since 1990. The lighting industry has already begun to revolutionize, much like the steel industry did back in the 90s. When the industry agreed to these efficiency standards in 2007, it was because they knew they could innovate and still be profitable by making the incandescent bulb, yes, colleagues, the incandescent bulb, more efficient and developing new technologies like compact fluorescence and LED light bulbs. And even better, the lighting industry began making those bulbs right here in the United States of America. Even in Pennsylvania, Sylvania retooled a plant in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, to make these incandescent light bulbs that meet the energy efficiency standards that we passed in 2007. They're being made in the United States by United States steelworkers in Pennsylvania, and you can find them on your shelf at the grocery store or the hardware store. Or you can get these Philips bulbs, also incandescent light bulbs, colleagues. They meet the energy standards that were set in 2007. Steelworkers are making the filaments in these bulbs in Bath, New York. In fact, U.S. steelworkers have a letter here that I'd like to submit for the record opposing this bill and telling us that at a time when Americans continue to experience downward financial pressures, energy-efficient light bulbs present an everyday solution to a much-needed cost savings.
Without objection. So entered.
Thank you. But it's not just steelworkers that are benefiting. Light bulbs that meet these standards are being made all over the United States of America. In 2011, TCP, one of the world's largest makers of CFLs, is opening a new factory in Ohio. I yield myself 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized for an
It's
additional
making a
30
new
seconds.
CFL factory in Ohio to meet the new demand. 7,000 U.S. jobs have been created by companies like Cree in North Carolina, Lighting Sciences Group in Florida, and Philips Lighting, the world's biggest lighting company, to produce the next generation of energy-efficient LED light bulbs. GE recently invested $60 million to create a global center of excellence for linear fluorescent lamp manufacturing in Bucyrus, Ohio, an action that will double the number of jobs there. New innovation in energy efficiency has brought jobs to this country. This is not the time to repeal these standards. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Texas.
Before I yield to the gentlelady from Tennessee, I'd point out that the light bulbs that my good friend Mr. Doyle just alluded to are 5 times to 6 times as expensive as the traditional incandescent light bulb, and they're not manufactured. I think there's one facility in the United States, a Sylvania facility, that still makes light bulbs. The rest have moved overseas. With that, I would yield 3 minutes to a co-sponsor of the legislation, a member of the committee, Mrs. Blackburn of Tennessee.
Gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the time. You know, the Chairman spoke to the cost of these bills and how incredibly expensive they are, and indeed our constituents have talked about that. And to my colleagues who are going to try to support this standard and this de facto ban on the incandescent light bulb, I would very simply say, please realize 2 wrongs do not make a right. I know you heard that as you grew up, and I would ask you to think about that in this chamber today. Putting this ban, putting these higher efficiency standards in place, many people thought it was the right decision. I didn't think it was the right decision. I voted against it in committee. I voted against all of this on the floor. But I would ask you just to remember, the American people are telling us this doesn't work. They don't like the restrictions that are there in the marketplace. They don't like the fact that the bulbs cost too much money. And I would also remind my colleagues that all of the CFLs, the compact fluorescent light bulbs, they're made in China. They are not made here. The CFLs don't work as well. It requires more bulbs to get the same amount of light in a given area. These things have proven to be very vulnerable to power surges. We hear that from our constituents in the rural areas. In essence, Madam Speaker, they don't save any energy. And we know that they're also dangerous because they're filled with mercury, and I know that Congressman Burgess, who has also worked on this with Chairman Barton and I, is going to speak to that. And there is a provision in this that does address the mercury levels. Also, our legislation says, and I think this is very important, that D.C. cannot mandate the standards on these bulbs, that your state government cannot mandate the standards on these bulbs, that we're going to leave that to the consumer to choose. And consumers want to have that choice. I think so many groups have come out in favor of our legislation and opposed to these light bulbs. Even the AFL-CIO has an interesting little bit on their labor union website about that light bulb, making the point that there are many ways to save electricity without shifting all these jobs to China for a mercury-filled light bulb. We know that the President thought that this was going to help create 800,000 U.S. jobs. The only jobs we have found is that the Winchester, Virginia plant shut down, and those 200 jobs, that employees that lost their jobs on September 24th, 2010, they saw their jobs go to China. There have been unanticipated consequences of the 07 Act, and it is time for us to say it was bad policy, it was a bad idea, and we need to get it off the books. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, I rise to manage the time on this bill on behalf of the Energy and Commerce Committee Democrats, and I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Without objection, and the gentleman from Massachusetts recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. First, let's start with how much electricity this saves for our country. It saves the need to construct 30 coal-fired plants over the next 20 years in the United States. Now, if you're a coal executive, you're a nuclear executive, you're going, oh no, kill those more efficient light bulbs. People in America are going to consume less electricity. It will cut into our profits. People will buy these light bulbs. And by the way, here's a Sylvania that costs, by the way, it looks just like those old bulbs too, because it is an old bulb. They just made it more efficient. Okay? And so people who are nostalgic for the way bulbs look for the last 100 years, it's the same look, and it cost $1.69 for this bulb. But it will save you. It will save you over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, a lot of money. But it will cost the coal industry and the nuclear industry who generate electricity a lot of money because they won't have to build 30 new coal-fired plants. So let's just think about other things. And by the way, every living descendant of Thomas Alva Edison opposes this amendment. By the way, as would every living descendant of Alexander Graham Bell oppose moving from black rotary dial phones to BlackBerries. I think that Alexander Graham Bell and his descendants would say, I think he'd be happy that you made the transition. But, of course, we had to pass legislation here on the House floor to move that technology. I think that people probably would think twice if a Xerox machine had to come with carbon paper at the same time, just in case people were still nostalgic for carbon paper rather than Xerox paper. Because that's really what this debate is all about. It's really a debate about whether or not we're going to continue to see an increase in the efficiency of technologies in our society, especially those that consume energy. In other words, there's a point to this, and the point is it reduces the amount of greenhouse gases that we have to send up into the atmosphere. It reduces the amount of energy that we have to think about importing from other countries. And it gives to the consumers something that over the life of the light bulb, and we're talking here about Philips and Sylvania and other companies who have already figured out in the last 4 years how to comply with the law. You don't have to buy one of those funny-looking new light bulbs. You can just buy one of those old light bulbs that look just like the one that your mother and father used to go down to the store and buy. Why? Because finally they had to make them more efficient. And by the way, what is the analogy? Well, back in 1987, I was able to author the Appliance Efficiency Act of 1987. And what has happened since then? Well, believe it or not, refrigerators are now 3 or 4 times more efficient. Air conditioning systems are now 3 or 4 times more efficient. And because of that, there are hundreds of coal-fired plants that did not have to get built in this country because all of these lights in this room, all of the air conditioning in this room, well, for every building across the country, piled up, that's why we need coal-fired and nuclear-fired plants. And the fewer of them that there are is directly related to how efficient we make the things that we plug into the wall. And so light bulbs are at the very top of the list because they're on in every single room in the United States every day. And so if you can double the efficiency, then you reduce dramatically the number of nuclear power plants or coal-fired plants that have to get built. That's really what we should be all about. We have to learn how to think smarter and not harder. We have to think how we use technology to improve our society and not bring out legislation on the floor that prohibits the advance of technology, prohibits the advance of science, prohibits the advance of efficiency in our society. And just like the BlackBerry has transformed our society in the last 15 years, and no one would want to go back to that old era of 1996 before the broadband revolution began, the same thing is true for these more modern, efficient light bulbs. They save people money, they give them just the same kind of light, They reduce the amount of pollution that we send up into the atmosphere, and they make America the leader technologically
Gentleman's time's
on these
expired.
technologies that are ultimately going to be sold in every
Gentleman's
country
time's
in the world.
expired. For
I
what
urge a
purpose
no
does
vote.
the gentleman from Texas rise?
I recognize myself briefly before I recognize Dr. Burgess. To my good friend from Massachusetts, the light bulbs that he just showed, the least expensive one of those I think he said was about $1.60, $1.70. Your traditional incandescent light bulb, you can buy, if you can find them, anywhere from 25 cents to 40 cents a piece. So that light bulb is still 5 to 6 times more expensive than the classic incandescent bulb. With that, I want to yield 3 minutes to another original sponsor of the legislation, a member of the Committee of Jurisdiction, the good doctor from Denton County, Texas, Dr. Michael Burgess. 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding. 4 years ago, the summer of 2007, the then new Democratic majority brought legislation to our committee that included a provision that I frankly did not understand what the world they were trying to do, a provision that would regulate the type of light bulb that every American would have to use in their home. During the markup of this bill, I was outspoken in my opposition to the language. I introduced amendment after amendment to try to modify or prevent this from happening, and over again I was struck down along party lines. I tried to amend the bill so that we would not have to require the use of a mercury-containing light bulb in areas where there were vulnerable populations, nurseries in hospitals, nursing homes, where it would be difficult to move the people out of the way in order to comply with the EPA's guidelines for how you deal with accidental breakage of one of these bulbs. The bottom line is that I and every other American should be permitted, should be allowed to determine what type of light bulb we use at home. It seems so simple. Whatever happened to government with the consent of the governed? But now the government wants to tell consumers what type of light bulb they use to read, cook, watch television, or light their garage. In fact, consumers should make that decision, and they should make that based upon what is available in the marketplace. However, we have distorted what's available in the marketplace. Proponents claim that this bill does not ban incandescent bulbs. Well, that's correct. What it does ban is the 100-watt light bulb. Let me repeat. The 2007 Energy Security Act bans the 100-watt light bulb. It's just flat wrong. Consumers should be making the decision as to whether or not they use a 100-watt bulb in their home, not bureaucrats in Washington. The new bulbs cost more. American families are already tightening their budgets. They need to be able to make the decision. Do I save on the electric bill or do I save on the purchase of the light bulb? We should not be picking winners and losers in the United States Congress. Now, I'm a strong supporter of energy efficiency. I do an energy efficiency summit every summer in my district. I did one last weekend. I invite speakers to talk about what businesses and constituents can do to conserve energy. I drive a hybrid. I've taken steps to make my home more efficient. But I've done all of this because it was the right thing to do, and I purchased those things on the open market because they made sense to me and my family, not because the federal government or even the gentleman from Massachusetts told me that this was what I should be doing. The American people should be able to choose what type of light bulb they use in their home. They should not be constrained to all of the romance of a Soviet stairwell when they go home in the evening. Look, I work in a federal building. I understand that in a federal building I'm going to work under fluorescent light. I get that. But when I go home at night, I should be able to read my paper by the light of an incandescent bulb, if that is my choice. I purchase other things, and I'm able to make an adult choice about that. I should be able to make the choice about what wavelength of light to use. Mr. Chairman, could I have an additional 30 seconds?
I grant the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
And here's the bottom line. Those of us of a certain age under a compact fluorescent bulb, we don't look as good as we do under an incandescent bulb. Even the former chairman of my Committee of Energy and Commerce suffers from what might be called spectrum fatigue under a compact fluorescent bulb. We need to be able to have the type of bulb that
right here.
We need to be able to have the type of bulb that Americans choose, not that Congress chooses. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose is the gentleman from California
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased at this time to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman and rise in opposition. You know, many have claimed that Washington will ban the sale of conventional incandescent light bulbs. My colleague from Texas just said he regrets that he would lose this soft glow of the incandescent light. Well, in fact, he can use an incandescent light. It looks like this, looks familiar. It's what in comic strips, you put above somebody's head to say, I've got a good idea. Well, not that I'm going to keep doing things the old way and stick in a rut. No, I got a good new idea. That's what happened a few years ago when it became apparent that technology had come so far that we didn't have to throw away 90% of the energy of an incandescent light bulb. Scientists had shown us how you can make light bulbs that would produce, as these do, 100 watts worth of light for 72 watts of electricity and electricity charge. And you could do it for $1.49 for a pair of them here. Okay? Well, in a bipartisan effort, this legislation that has driven the country forward in lighting was passed. And now the majority, on a partisan tear, is coming and trying to repeal it, just when it shows that it is working. About 15% of residential electricity goes into lighting. Wouldn't anyone like to save 30% of that, which is just being thrown away? Now, my colleagues say, Congress shouldn't be doing this. Why are they not also issuing calls for turn-of-the-century Model Ts or ice boxes? They have sort of a yearning for the good old days. Technologies that are roughly as old as the incandescent light bulb. We're proud in New Jersey of Thomas Edison, but we've improved the talking machines. We've done a little bit better with the moving pictures. Now, Model Ts and ice boxes are technologies that actually happen to have been improved through federal standards. The companies are moving rapidly to make more efficient lighting that will give you all the advantages you want, that you're used to, of the incandescent bulb, and save you bundles. Yeah, this costs a few dimes more. But let me tell you, you start saving dimes the moment you screw these into the socket.
Gentleman's time's expired.
This is a bad idea to repeal.
For what purpose is the gentleman from Texas rise?
Could I inquire the time remaining on each side?
The gentleman from Texas has 9 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from California has 6.5 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Texas.
I want to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Houston, Texas, Judge Ted Poe. 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Energy efficiency is a good idea. Mandated by the federal government under this legislation that we're currently serving under, it is preventing competition. The federal government is creating a monopoly. The Model T Ford is not outlawed. You can still buy one if you can find one, but the federal government hadn't banned it just because it's inefficient. Ice boxes, some of us actually know what an ice box looks like, is not banned by the federal government. You can still find one and use one if you want to because it's competition, even though they are inefficient. But the issue is, should the federal government come in and mandate a monopoly? And that is what has occurred. Second, these new light bulbs, these CFL light bulbs, are dangerous to our health. Dr. Burgess has already pointed out they contain mercury. I thought for years we were trying to get rid of the mercury in our environment. But they are in these light bulbs. Plus now, French scientists have discovered that these new CFL light bulbs may cause blindness in children. German scientists have found out, it's reported that these light bulbs may cause cancer. Now, isn't that lovely? The federal government mandating something that is hazardous to our health because you have no choice. And the whole issue is about choice, Madam Speaker, that we can let the consumer decide. What's wrong with letting the consumer decide?
Why are you opposed to the consumer making this choice? You want the federal government to mandate it. Now the federal government is in the business of forcing us to do something that is harmful. And finally, the EPA even warns in their 1,000-word, 3-page, single-page document about these CFL light bulbs, how dangerous they are, and they tell us how to dispose of one of these light bulbs. And I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record this 3-page, single-spaced report by the EPA on how to dispose of one of these light bulbs.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we are, after the passage of this legislation years ago, finding out that these aren't the greatest things in the world. And we have found and shed a little light on this new CFL light bulb. The CFL light bulb is not a brighter idea. It is too expensive. It is unhealthy for Americans. It doesn't allow for competition. So if we don't pass this bill, we might as well turn out the lights. The party is over for the traditional incandescent light bulb. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Mr. Altmaier, 1 minute.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
I continue to hear my colleagues promote the fantasy that government has banned the incandescent light bulb. They think that if they say it over and over again, that it'll be true. But it's not true. The incandescent light bulb is not banned. Manufacturers are not told which technology to use to produce light bulbs, and consumers will still be able to buy the incandescent light bulb for years to come. Incandescent bulbs that meet the new standards are already on the market. 3 American-made brands are here before me. They have the same look and emit the same light as traditional incandescent bulbs, but there is a difference. They last much longer and offer substantial energy efficiency savings for consumer. Hopefully, a symbolic light bulb will soon go on above the heads of my colleagues to enlighten them, to let them know that their rhetoric bears no fact to reality, and the incandescent bulb is here to stay whether they like it or not.
Expired. The gentleman from Texas.
Yeah, 1 minute to one of our vigorous new members from the great state of Illinois, Congressman Holmgren, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of the Bulb Act because, simply put, the government has no business telling my constituents what kind of light bulbs they can use in their homes. Here's a novel idea. Let's let the free market work. This valuable bill would restore consumer choice and remove the danger posed by mandated mercury-filled compact fluorescent bulbs in our homes. As a constituent of mine said recently, like we need a light bulb that requires a hazmat suit to clean up if you break it. I urge my colleagues from both parties to support this bill and restore consumer choice to their constituents. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 5 minutes. But first of all, let me inquire how much time we have before I begin. How much time on each side?
5.5 minutes, sir.
I'm sorry.
5.5 minutes.
And how much on the other side?
They have 6.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, you have to ask, how did they come up with this great idea to put this bill on the House floor today?